Hey, what's up my dudes? In today's video, I've got another ring tutorial for you. Now this is going to be a glowstone ring, but it's going to be a bit different. In this video, we're going to start off with a solid brass rod. I thought this would make for a really interesting video because it shows all the machining processes and steps that it goes to take it from a solid raw material into getting it into the ring blank shape that I need. I know for most of my other glowstone rings, I start off with ring blanks that I have pre-made for me, just because that's by far the best way for me to do things in terms of the time it takes as well as economically. But I actually can't get ring blanks made out of brass, and I had a customer who wanted a brass glowstone ring, and so I was forced to custom make it just using a rod of brass. So here you see me cutting off a chunk of it, and then I'm going to take this over to the lathe. Now the first step in the shaping process is going to be to trim away this outer layer of brass on here. This will make sure the piece, at least the cutaway part of it, is perfectly centered on the lathe. You can see just because it is a nice cylindrical rod doesn't mean that once I put it in the lathe jaws it lines up perfectly. So that's why you see me trimming away this outer shell, as well as the ring size. It needs to be a bit smaller than this diameter. So I'm just trimming it down to this final outer diameter that we'll need, and then we will begin hollowing out the inside. Okay, now I'm switching from my lathe cutter, switching over to a center drill. And I'm just going to plunge this right into the center of the brass rod, and that'll help me get this thing hollowed out. Okay, after hollowing that out a little bit, I'm going to switch back over to the lathe cutting bits. And this time you'll see I'm using a rectangular shaped cutting bit rather than the triangle one I was using earlier. And that's so that we can cut the groove that we need in order to put the glow inlay in. So you see me just slowly plunge the cutter into the material as I'm spinning it, and then I stop every now and then to measure and make sure that all my dimensions are correct. I'm using the calipers to make sure I've got the dimensions I need. I've got them written down on a notepad next to my lathe. So that's the purpose for the calipers. It's so I can double check that I'm doing everything correctly. Now that I've got the groove cut, I'm switching to a boring bar, and then I'm going to continue to hollow the ring out a bit more. And I'm going to stop a bit before the final inner diameter that I actually need for the ring, and that'll be so that the ring can be a little bit stronger until we get it further along. And that way I can go in by hand by using the Dremel that you'll see me use. That way I can widen the size of the ring and be a lot more gentle on it. Now that that's done, it's time to go ahead and jump into the inlay materials. So for this ring, I'm going to be doing copper pieces as well as meteorite pieces. And this copper I'm using it comes from what's called float copper. It's natural copper pieces that people find in the ground. And the reason I like this is because it has so much natural variation to it. The surface of the copper is really diverse and it has a lot of different shapes and cool and interesting features to it. So that's why I use that over just regular chunks of copper. And then the silver pieces you see me using, those are meteorite fragments. And so the scrap pieces I have from my meteorite rings, I take those and then I cut out all the different pieces so they'll be suitable for inlaying into the ring. Now that those main pieces are in place, I'm going to take some meteorite shavings as well as some copper shavings and put a few of those fragments in the ring. Those will add just some small accents to it, just a little flare for the meteorite you'll just see some silver speckles, and then for the copper you'll see those coppery colored shavings. Once those are all in place, it's time to go ahead and use the two different glow powders. You'll see I'm using this purple and aqua colored glow powder combination. The purple glow powder glows purple and the aqua glows aqua. So once we see some of the glow shots that I'll show you pictures of at the end of the video, you'll see it's got those two different glow colors, and I think they complement each other pretty nicely. And so this ring looks really interesting, has two colors to it during the day as well as during the night. So I think we've got a really cool combination of glow powder going on here. So the process here is fairly repetitive. I'm just adding one layer at a time. I put down a thin layer of the CA glue, and then I go ahead and sprinkle in some of the glow powders. And one thing to notice is how I'm putting in the two different colors. And you'll notice as I'm putting in the glow powders that I am pretty strategic about where I put them. I don't want there to be certain clumps or areas of one color. I don't want one half of the ring to be purple and the other to have the aqua on it. I want to get it pretty diverse so you can see a lot of cool, interesting detail there, and then just get a lot of swirls and cool patterns in there. Now for the next step, I need to remove all of the excess glow powder as well as inlay material. And for this, I would typically use a Dremel, but in this case, actually all of the inlay materials are machinable. So usually I use a chunk of crystal like sapphire or amethyst or something like that. And you can't cut into those. Those will just break and shatter and cause lots of problems there. So I usually have to use a Dremel for those. But for this one, I'm just using the copper and meteorite. And both of those are machinable. So I'm going to carefully use my cutting bit and just slowly trim that away till I get it to the point where it's almost flush. And then I'll finish it up with the Dremel. And the reason I do that is just because it's a bit quicker and more precise than the Dremel. Now at this point, we've got all of the materials and everything we're going to add to the ring done. It's just going to be sanding it down and polishing it. So it hardly looks like what an actual ring is going to look like. It's even connected to the rod still. But I think that is kind of funny to think about how everything we are going to add to the ring is here. And from here on out, it's just going to be removing material. So to separate the ring from the rest of the brass rod, I'm going to be using that same rectangular lathe bit and then just plunging it straight into the brass. And then you can see I'm just using an Allen wrench here to catch the ring once it cuts all the way through. And here it is. We're ready to do a little bit more sizing to it and polish it up, and we should be ready to go. Now, like I said, I do want to be careful with the ring. It is a bit more fragile at this point, so I don't want to go clamping it in the lathe jaws necessarily. So for that reason, I'm going to be using the Dremel to finish getting it up to the right size. Then for some of the more gentle stuff, like just removing the corners on the edges to give it a comfort finish, as well as the polishing, then we'll use the lathe jaws for that. So you see I've got it in the jaws. I use that Dremel to knock off that edge. That makes the ring way more comfortable to wear. And then I go through all the different levels of sandpaper. I start with 220 and end at about 1,000. Now after getting all that sanding done, I'm going to be using these two paper towels that I have put different polishing compounds on. The first one has a medium one, and the second one has an extra fine compound on it. So even though I sanded it all the way up to 1,000 grit, it's still not even reflective. So it's really cool to see the transformation that just that polishing compound makes in just a few seconds. Now at this point we've got the inside done and we're ready to go ahead and take care of the outside. But when putting it on this expanding ring mandrel, I definitely don't want to mess up that finish that I just worked so hard on. So I'm going to put down plenty of electric tape. That'll protect the ring from getting scratches from this hard steel ring mandrel. Now that we've got this safely secured on the mandrel, I'm going to be doing a very similar process we did on the inside, just going through all the different sandpaper grits. One thing that I'm doing differently on the outside as compared to the inside is using these square steel rods, and I'm putting the sandpaper up against those. And what you'll see is that I'm using those to put the bevels on the ring. So those are the chamfered edges that you see. I'm doing that because if I was doing it by hand, I would end up just rounding those edges over and we wouldn't actually get that sharp beveled look that I'm going for. It makes the ring look a bit more professional. Now that we've got those sandpapers all done, I'm going to pull it off the mandrel, and then I'm going to polish it by hand using the Dremel felt wheel that I've got here. And then once again, just like on the inside, I'm starting with the medium compound and then ending with the fine compound. And with that, this ring is done. This is definitely a really unique looking ring. I've never made anything that looks quite like this, and mostly just because of the gold color that it has. I think the purple and gold, those complement each other really well. And then just the other metallic colors that are in here. We've got the copper color as well as the silver meteorite color. So we've got 3 different metallic materials in here. All of them look amazing. All of them are nice and shiny and reflective. And I think we have a really cool organic look to the glowstone inlay I've got. We've got that natural copper with all those little surface details to it, as well as the meteorite pieces, which have many of the same characteristics. And then just the marbling of the 2 different glow colors. I think those go perfectly together. So definitely be sure to let me know what you think. I'm going to throw up a couple glow shots of the ring here at the very end. I know you guys always ask for those. The reason I sometimes don't do it is because it can be pretty difficult. I need to do it in a dark room and use long exposure on my camera and all of that. So I went through the extra effort for this video. Hopefully you guys like them. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you think this ring is cool, you can always check out my website. I always have a link to it down in my description of every video. I sell all sorts of different customizable rings there. I do a lot of exotic materials as well as cool glowing rings and things like that. Also, if you're interested in discount codes, be sure to check out my Instagram. That's where I post all of those. And that's also a great way to see anything behind the scenes that's going on. If you do end up following me on Instagram, be sure to leave me a note on one of my posts because I'm interested to see how many of you guys actually follow through with that. So just leave me a note. Say, hey, I came from the brass glowstone ring video. Because I really do like connecting with you guys, and Instagram's just more of a closer, tight-knit community. I've got less followers there. So I'm able to be a little bit more involved there, which is something I'm always trying to do. Anyways, I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did, and I will see you in the next one.